Hello, everyone. This is Heath Towson from Grovewood Village, along with our museum manager, Tom Anders. And today we both led a special interview with Barbara Blomberg, the youngest daughter of Harry Blomberg, our museum's founder, and Asheville legend Jerry Sternberg. Now, Jerry is related to the Blomberg family. Harry Blomberg started selling cars in Asheville as early as 1923 with his first business, Harry's Motor Inn, down on Spruce Street. He later obtained the Cadillac and Pontiac franchise in 1937 and moved to Haywood Street in downtown Asheville. He even had a used car dealership located down on Cox Avenue, as well as several service and storage facilities called Harry's Motor Inn. Family was a big part of this business. Pictured here is his oldest daughter, Marilyn, and his son-in-law, Buddy Patton. Now, Buddy is actually Jerry's cousin, and they're related through Jerry's father. Now, Harry and Buddy had a very special relationship and ran the dealer together for a long time, which we'll hear more about today. Buddy really propelled this dealer into the next half of the 21st century to make it a more modern business. Now, Jerry has had many exciting tales, as he'll tell us through the video. One of his most exciting adventures was owning Fred Seeley's castle up on Town Mountain, which is featured below. I hope you all will enjoy the video. Thanks so much.
Wherever you want to start.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? History or?
Let's start with, where did you go to school here? Like, tell us about growing up as a kid in Asheville.
I went to school, I grew up I've always lived in North Asheville. All these years, except when I was in the military and in college. And I was born in Biltmore Hospital. And we lived in Kenilworth, and then from there, we moved Garden Terrace. Then things got hard, difficult in the Depression. We moved into some small apartments over there off of Hillside. And then I grew up mostly on Westall. I went to Claxton School. I went to David Miller and Lee Edwards and the University of North Carolina. So I'm a
Tar Heel.
educational graduate of all these city and state schools in North Carolina.
That was just the regular city school system back in the day.
Yeah.
Right. Claxton, David Miller,
Right.
Lee Edwards. When did you graduate from UNC?
I left there in 51. My degree came through in 52. I went in the Korean War.
Which branch of the service were you in?
Navy. I was going to get drafted. And so I went I thought maybe I could get a commission as an officer since I was a college graduate. And they told me the Naval Academy, not the academy, but where they trained officers in Newport, Rhode Island was full and I'd have to wait. I said, that's fine. They said, the problem is if you wait, the Army can still draft you, so you better get in the service now. So I went to the Navy and went to boot camp in San Diego. And then went to Officers Candidate School in Newport. We were in Europe, Far East, Korea, all those places.
How many years?
5 years there.
And what was it like when you got out of the Navy and came home?
Asheville was fairly quiet little town. Changes were underway because after World War II, the military guys coming out of the military particularly started making a new life in Asheville, and we got new leadership, which became entrenched and stayed in there for 30 or 40 years.
Right.
Asheville was still a small, basically tourist town, and we had a few big industries.
Come on in, Babs.
Hi.
Good to see you. How you
Good.
Nice to see you.
Hello, Cuz.
How are you, dear?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you. How's that?
I'd like to know a little about yours, where you went to elementary school, and did you go through the city school system and everything here in Asheville?
Did I?
Yes.
No, I actually went to a school, a Catholic school. It was a private school run by the nuns, and it was St. Genevieve of the Pines.
Yes.
And my sister went there, I went there, my two nieces went there, and I think my brother-in-law's mother went there. So
From elementary school?
elementary, and then my 2 years in high school, I went away to boarding school, and I came back and graduated at St. Genevieve's.
Uh-huh. So you never went to Lee Edwards?
Never did.
Never did. And where was the boarding school?
In New York,
In New York.
right outside of New York City.
And so that's sort of what got you thinking about moving to New York as you became an
Well,
adult?
actually, I fell in love with New York when I was a child. I would go to camp in Maine, and my mother would take me up a week ahead of time, and we'd go to Broadway shows and
Oh,
everything.
okay.
And that's when I fell in love with New York.
And what maybe got you into theater, right?
Yeah, actually it did.
Really?
It did. It got me that much more interested in theater. I
Do you-
remember particularly seeing musicals, people like Gwen Verdon and Mary Martin, and I said, wow, they're great. You know,
Wow.
when I was a child.
Do you remember any shows that you saw while you were there?
Yes, I saw Los South Pacific, Guys and Dolls. What was Gwen Verdon's first show? I can't remember. But mainly all the classics, Carousel, you know, all the Rodgers and Hammerstein ones.
Wow.
It was really quite educational and lovely. It was wonderful. I just remember walking down the aisle during an overture and saying, oh, I like this.
That's awesome.
And so how did you end up dipping your toe into the acting world?
Started in actually St. Genevieve's my last year. At St. Genevieve's, I was the lead in the senior play, and we had boys and girls, but they were all played by girls. It was a girls' school.
Right.
And the show was Jenny Kissed Me. It was Jenny. And then I went to the University of Wisconsin, and I studied speech and drama there. And then I went to New York, just didn't have the chutzpah to get out there and do what an actor does. So I was very lucky in becoming a casting director. So I was on the other side of the field. But I belonged to a drama group up there, the St. Bart's Players, and I used to perform at night and everything. Yeah.
I've met some of your St. Bart's friends here before. I've heard, you have friends come here, and I've heard them mention St. Bart's.
Yep.
And that
St.
was a
Bart's
drama
Players.
group?
It was a great group. We were the oldest, continuously moneyed amateur theater group in New York City. And we were considered off Broadway.
Right. And how did you end up at the University of Wisconsin?
I wanted to leave Asheville. I wanted to go to a co-ed school. So I applied to, I think, 3 or 4, and just chose Wisconsin. And it was really very eye-opening because there was always so much prejudice and everything down here, and you found the same thing up there.
Right.
I was kind of running away from all that. Which is why I love New York, because you feel, growing up here Jewish, you feel very left out.
Yeah.
But in New York, it's like, wow, it's okay. There are a lot of us around.
Right. So, one of the things we really wanted to do here today is get a little better grip on how Harry acquired this place, what was going on in 1953 here that made him interested enough to come over and meet with Fred Seeley Jr. or whoever he was talking to and make the deal to buy this place. What do you know about that?
Well, I guess I know pretty much what you know, but he came over here to buy a table for his lake house in Lake Lure, because he did those big long tables were around. And while he was here, he saw the still, which was in the weaving, which was then the weaving building, and wanted to buy it. And Fred Seeley said, I can't sell it to you, but I can sell you the whole place, because it was kind of on the done the downside, you know,
Yeah.
it was either they were gonna tear it down or sell it to a rag factory or something like that. And so on the strength of a handshake, he said, okay, and he bought it. And he ran it as a gallery, and he had still, and we took a lot of tourists there. I used to work here in the summers. I took a lot of tourists just to see it, and the gallery was very, very small at the time. It wasn't what it is today. And we had crafts from like Cherokee and places
Yeah.
like that, you know, definitely not high-end crafts. And then after he passed away, my brother-in-law, Buddy Patton, he is the one who created what you see today, Grovewood Village, or Grovewood Gallery.
So more than anybody in the family, this entire thing was kind of Buddy's vision.
Yes.
You would say he was the
He
lead?
always had the idea that he would like to have a craft village
Yes.
with artist studios and crafts, you know, high-end crafts, as well as keeping the feeling of the history here.
Right.
And so it was really his vision that did it.
Jerry, you and Buddy were cousins,
Yeah,
and how were you related?
my grandfather, we had a common grandfather,
Okay.
a grandmother, let's see.
The grants.
Grandfather, we had a common grandfather.
And did Buddy convert to Judaism after he met Marilyn?
Buddy
He
was
was Jewish.
He was bar
Raised
mitzvah.
in Jewish family. His Buddy's mother had 3 sisters and a brother, and my dad was the brother, and no, they were all Jewish.
And how did he and Marilyn meet?
I remember that because Buddy had moved back to Asheville. He grew up in Philadelphia after his parents divorced, and they moved to Philadelphia, and that's where Buddy and his sisters grew up. And then he went to the Army. He was very young, 17, and he came back here to work for Uncle Joe, Jerry's father. And Jerry's mother called. My sister was having a party. She was like 16, and Annette called. Jerry's mother called my sister, said, my nephew's in town, love to have you meet some of the people here and everything. And I remember, and I was very young, my sister calling on the phone, this is Marilyn Blomberg. You don't know me from Adam's House Cat. I remember specifically she said that. But well, I'm having a party tonight, let me have you come over. And I was, of course, the little bratty kid who would always, you know, sit and have to be in the middle of things. And I remember sitting in the living room, and Buddy walked in, and I went, oh, he was so, remember how gorgeous he was? Always.
He's very handsome, yeah.
Very handsome. But he had his dark curly hair, and he just walked in, and the whole room went, oh, who is that? You know? And I think I just fell in awe of him at a very early age.
And so how did Marilyn end up with him?
Well, they met,
Yeah,
and she was very young,
yeah.
and they started dating, and she was dating somebody else, and you know, they just met that way.
Yeah.
That's how they met.
And did they get married in their 20s when they were?
She was 19, and he was 6 years older.
Okay.
Yeah,
And he worked for my dad.
yeah.
Down on the river?
Down on Depot Street.
Okay.
And they had a junkyard, and then my dad also had a rendering plant. He worked at the rendering, he ran the rendering plant for a while.
And he used to go get hides, I remember.
He
He would
bought
go to Tennessee and get hides.
So as your father got into the automobile business, did Buddy go to work for him immediately? No.
No, he was still working for Uncle Joe for a number of years, and then he graduated, went over to work for Dad. Went to the dealership.
And did your father start Buddy off as just a salesman, or was he immediately the sales manager?
No, I don't remember,
Yeah,
frankly. Probably just a salesman.
right.
And then he went to work for him, and then I'm not quite sure how that worked.
But that would have been when the dealership was downtown.
No, wait, yes,
Yeah, they moved to the West Asheville location in 1966.
yeah. And they got married. Yeah, I guess it was. Well, he worked for Uncle Joe for a long time before he went to work for Daddy, but I don't remember him working downtown.
Okay,
But he probably did, but I was really young, so I don't
Right.
remember.
right.
Yeah.
And your sister, Marilyn, who I knew pretty well because she used to play a lot of golf, were you two really close? Or were you?
Well, yes, I adored my sister.
Yeah,
I was like the tag-along kid,
right.
yeah. And she was like, no, I just.
You're kind of getting in the way, huh?
Yeah, right. No, we were very, very close. And as we, grew up, we grew a little apart, politically, et cetera, but we were always very close.
Mm-hmm. And Jerry, you and Buddy had a close relationship for most of your whole life?
In latter years.
Yeah.
When I was a boy, I was working in the junkyard, and Buddy was, let's see, he was probably 6 or 7 years older now, and he'd been in the military, and he used to tease me all the time. And one time he made me mad. I was about 13 or 14. It was hard, nasty work down there anyhow, so it wasn't
Yeah.
a place where you had a wonderful time every day going to work. But he teased me about something, and I picked up an old pistol or something and hit him in the back of the head and dropped him.
Oh.
But later on, Buddy and I became very close. Buddy was a wonderful man.
Yeah.
He had a heart of gold. He was smart. He was kindly. He was thoughtful of people that nobody, and did things for people that nobody ever knew about. He was never looking after Buddy. He was looking after his family and his friends and the people that worked for him. And he would take most unbelievable special interest in people that really needed help.
That's wonderful. I got that impression. I got to know Bill Cantonen, who used to run the YMCA, and he told me a story that he was having a fundraiser one time. It's probably in the 1970s or so, maybe 70s or 80s, and that Buddy bailed him out, gave him the final big chunk of money that he needed to get over the hump for his fundraising drive for the YMCA. And I know that over the years, St. Joseph Hospital, did Marilyn work for many, many years as a volunteer?
As a volunteer, she ran the gift shop there.
Yes.
Initially it was a very small little gift shop, and she ran it, and she made it into a very successful enterprise for the hospital. And it was for about 25 years, and then she was president of the Hospital Volunteers of North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
But getting back to Buddy, he was an extremely modest man and did not like recognition. As far as the Y is concerned, they had a dedication where they dedicated the children's wing or something like that to Buddy.
Yes.
And it was so hard for him to accept all those accolades.
Really?
Because he was such a giver, but he didn't want to stay.
He wasn't interested in the limelight.
Not at all.
Not at all. Interesting.
Not at all.
Did he ever talk about working with Harry, with your dad? Like, what was their relationship like?
Interesting.
What'd you say?
Interesting. It was kind of a love-hate, not hate, but love. My dad was a powerhouse, and
Right.
Buddy had a big personality, and
A little headbutt going on there, yeah.
It would clash. But there's a picture of them where Buddy just grabs my dad by the neck and gives him a kiss, and Daddy's grinning and everything. But sometimes didn't agree on a lot.
Yeah, but Buddy did an incredible job of making the dealership successful, right?
Oh yeah, but I mean, Buddy wanted to get GMC, and Daddy said no, you know, he didn't want to spend the money or anything, which he didn't want to spend the money on a lot of things. But Daddy was in the hospital, and Buddy walked in the hospital. He said, "I just want to tell you, I just signed with GMC. See you later."
So up to that point, it was just Cadillac and Pontiac.
Cadillac or Pontiac, yeah.
Right.
And then it was GMC, and then of course Pontiac stopped producing.
Yeah, so getting GMC was a good move.
Oh, tremendous.
Huge, yeah.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
That's practically the business now, you know,
Right.
the trucks and things.
Right.
Were the foreign cars ever that profitable? Like when you had MG and Awesome Healy?
EMG, no, I don't think so. I mean, again, I don't know. I can't really answer that knowledgeably.
I'll tell you a story about Buddy. I'll tell you too. I told me when I was working with him, I was jealous of him really because my dad absolutely worshipped him. And now here I was, you know, I was much younger, but Buddy, it was everything Buddy. And he was in Yiddish we call it a schmeichler. He could do little things that made people feel good about it. And one day we were in the office, and my dad had something wrong with his fingernail. And when my dad came back from lunch, Buddy had gone out and got him a nail clipper and left it on his desk. And that kind of stuff just killed me. But one of the funny stories that I remember about Harry had a little house down in Miami, and he would spend most of the winters down there, didn't he?
As much as he could, yeah.
And Buddy was running the dealership, and Harry had a real gruff voice. I don't know if any of you remember Harry, I'm certain she does. It was snowing like hell here in Asheville. I don't know, all the roads were closed and everything, and Harry calls up about noon. He's sitting down there on his little boat that he had. "Hey, boy, how many cars did you sell today?" Buddy says, "Well, Harry, it's 6 inches of snow out here. We can't. Goddamn, boy, I didn't call for a weather report. How many cars did you sell?" That's an absolute true story.
Man. Did Harry like to gamble?
Not that I know of.
He didn't gamble like on horses or dogs or like to go to the dog track or anything like that?
Not that I know of. I don't
Yeah.
know that much about it, but you don't remember ever being together. I don't think so.
My father was what you would call,
But he'd go down to Miami, he'd sell a bunch of Cadillacs down there. He had a big personality.
I see. So he was doing business.
And tell him the story. I think you should tell him the Meyer Lansky.
oh, okay. Daddy had a friend who was an auctioneer named Jimmy Mann in Florida, in Miami. And he called up, he said, "Harry, I've got this, excuse me, allergies. I've got this couple I know coming up to Asheville, and we'd like you, to say hello and everything." And my mother, being the most gracious hostess in the world, had him over for drinks, and my sister had just built her house, and she was having a party that night. So this very mild-mannered man and very charming wife were at our house, and I remember the wife, she was just lovely, and the man just kind of sat there. And then we went over to my sister's house and for the party, and afterwards, I think the FBI knocked on Daddy's door. "What's your connection with Meyer Lansky?" Who was, of course, the big mafia Murder Incorporated guy. Who knew? And Daddy really didn't know, because in many ways he was very naive about the world. He knew his business and everything,
Right.
but the greater world he didn't pay that much attention to. So it was just so funny. I mean, here, and it was right, Meyer Lansky's name was not as popular as we know it today.
Right.
He was just kind of in the background. But he was really responsible for a lot of what happened. He was the brains of the mafia. He and this other guy, the two Jewish guys, were the brains of the Italian mafia.
Finance part of it, money, he was the money man.
You're the money man.
And
Yeah, he was a big bootlegger.
he and some of them were the ones that, first financed Bugsy Siegel in Vegas to build the Flamingo Hotel out there. And everybody was playing fast and loose with that money, and it was not going well. And Meyer was in charge of all this, and probably was his decision that Bugsy, who had moved to California, needed to be not healthy anymore.
So this is kind of when the mob goes from New York to Miami and then out west.
No, the mob didn't operate much in Florida, I don't think.
Really?
I think they went
They were down
there
in Cuba.
because
They went to Havana.
They
Big.
escaped. Meyer was big on Havana. He
Yeah.
built
Okay.
that casino.
Yeah, until Castro came in, and then everything went.
Did you see Casino?
The movie?
Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't that the one that's the story of Meyer Lansky?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Babs, I've heard you on a number of occasions talk a little about your mother and also your Aunt Edna. Did you have an aunt named Edna?
Yeah, my father's sister. I had Aunt Edna and Aunt Frida. Aunt Edna lived in Washington most of her life. She worked for the government, for the
Mhm.
Pentagon. And Aunt Frida lived in New York for a long, long time, then came back here.
And I forgot what I was going to ask you now.
About Aunt Edna.
No, I'm sorry. I lost it there for a second.
I wish I had paid more attention to my Aunt Frida, because she used to tell stories about Asheville growing up here. But to me, she was like crazy Aunt Frida.
Yeah.
So I would just kind of run away. And I was so sorry I didn't listen to her more. She had a great sense of humor.
I think we all have relatives that we're sorry we didn't listen to a little bit more.
Because I would know much more about, Asheville's history, Asheville's Jewish
So I
history.
remember that.
Oh, Michael Knight.
And then what was the other brother?
Sigmund.
Sigmund was the memory expert, is that
Yeah.
right?
He was a memory expert. He had a show that he would take around the country. He was a good-looking man, and he was a singer. He used to sing in the temple, and he had a program on the radio called Rambling Bill from Over the Hill. It was like a radio thing, 15 minutes a day or something like that. And this guy, John Ely, do you know that name? He's the author
No.
here.
I've heard of the name, yeah.
His
Okay.
daughter's Jennifer Ely
Oh,
in
yeah.
Pride and Prejudice.
Is what?
His daughter, Jennifer Ely, was in
Yes,
Colin
Jennifer
Firth.
Ely's the actress. And
Right.
John was married to Rosemary Harris, a famous Broadway actress, and she's still living. But anyhow, I met them up in Mitchell County, and John said that he used to produce my uncle's radio show.
Wow.
When he was a young man.
No kidding.
So the circle.
Now, I wanted to ask, was Harry pretty involved at the temple at Beth Hatafila?
Yeah, he was president at one time. Yeah, he was.
Wow.
I know we came across some of those pictures that you gave us here recently where your father had been evidently the center of attention at several different gatherings and things around town. He was evidently not afraid to dress up and be in front of a crowd, because some of those pictures we've got of him, he seems like he was the center of a party at several different gatherings around town. So
He did a lot for the community, charity-wise, as did Jerry's father.
yeah, and
But he was a little tight with the dollar. He always, my brother-in-law used to have to. I mean, he'd buy his clothes at pennies if he could. But Buddy, being quite the dresser. And
Yeah.
they would take him to New York, take him to New York to get suits made.
They weren't getting suits made here at Biltmore Industries?
Oh, well, that too, his sport coats.
Yeah,
But but he would take it, they had a tailor up there that they liked.
because I know Buddy was a real sharp dresser.
Ooh,
Yeah.
wasn't he? Wow. Yeah, but
Did you tell me a story one time about Harry going out in a suit that was a little bit cheaper? I think he went out in the rain and it shrunk on him. Do you remember that?
I don't think, did I tell you that? I don't remember that.
I thought you told me that Buddy had to help him go buy a suit because
Yeah,
he had
right.
this suit that had shrunk and he kept wearing it. He was like, you can't do that.
He used to never carry cigarettes. He bummed cigarettes everywhere.
Buddy or Harry?
No, Harry.
Harry.
Oh,
He bummed cigarettes.
His,
I'll tell you a story.
okay.
I lived in the Sheraton after I moved out of the castle. And Harry had, for reasons I don't know, came there once in a while. And he ate, had a good restaurant in the Sheraton. And the woman that ran the place down there was, they called her Smitty. And he'd come in and say, Smitty, how much are the ham and eggs today? She said, Harry, they're $2.50. Damn, he says, they got them for $2 over at the Waffle House. I think I'll go over there.
It's true.
Could you give me a cigarette? He let.
He'd bum a cigarette and go somewhere else.
You know, his thing was, got a cigarette, got a cigarette, at what time is it? No, got a cigarette, something, what time is it? That was his thing. But he never carried cigarettes.
I know what I was going to ask you a second ago. How did Buddy get the nickname Buddy? His name was Siegfried, right?
Well, according to what I've heard, he had an African-American woman taking care of him when he was born. And she said, I'm not going to call that boy Siegfried, I'm going to call him Buddy. And it stuck.
That stuck from the time he was a little boy.
Born.
Right? Oh, really? So that was always,
Yeah, I'm not
because
gonna
they always
call
called
him
him Buddy Pat.
Well, Siegfried was his grandfather's name.
Okay.
Siegfried Milton. And sometimes he'd say Stephen Michael. Siegfried Milton.
SM, yeah.
SM.
Yeah.
oh.
Interesting. Wow.
And when Buddy went into the Army, he had P for Protestant on his dog tags because his name was Patton, and they just assumed he was Protestant. So he said that he would have been bar mitzvah, but he said that he would go into a room full of people and they were making anti-Semitic jokes and stuff like that, and he said he would just burn, So it's when he came back to Asheville that he, decided he was going to be who he was. He was Jewish because his mother was Jewish.
Interesting. Jerry, I know you've been through this a lot, but tell us just a little bit about how you acquired Seeley's Castle.
Okay. I was in the scrap metal business and the surplus business. My granddaddy had a sign down on Depot Street years before, said, we buy anything and sell everything, so I had the same sign. And one day, out of a clear blue sky in 1963 or 4, somewhere in there, a real estate agent calls me and says, how would you like to buy a castle? I said, what the hell are you talking about? He says, well, Seeley's Castle's for sale. I said, so? He says, would you like to look at it? And I thought, well, yeah, I'd like to look at it just to see what it's like. So he came, picked me up, and we went up there and looked at it. What had happened was, when Seeley died, Mrs. Seeley moved to the Vanderbilt Hotel immediately out of the castle. She gave, or at least discounted the property to
Asheville Biltmore.
Asheville Biltmore College.
Mm-hmm.
Then they built the new college, which is now UNCA. They had the property for sale, and two guys, Albert Owings and Kemmons Wilson were brother-in-laws. Kemmons Wilson was the guy that started the Holiday Inns. He built the first Holiday Inn in Knoxville. They were from Memphis, and Owings was his brother-in-law. And they bought it to build the Tierra Apartments, which are what they call something else now. But if you look at those apartments, because they weren't going to spend a lot of money on new architecture, they look just like a Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
So, after they about completed the college, they had this castle down there, which was sitting empty. Kids were coming up there in the night, and the A.B. students thought that belonged to them, and they'd have parties, and they had a hell of a time with it. It was growing up in the weeds, and so they asked me what I liked, because I said, well, I like to buy it. And I told them, I said, well, how much do you want for this castle? He says, we want $125,000. And it had 7 acres of land with it, but that land was
Grown up.
Today they build on that land like nothing.
Yeah.
But in those days, you didn't build so much on the side of the mountain.
Right.
And I said, well, hell, it's not worth that. I said, what would you give? And I looked at the building, I saw all the chandeliers and all the windows were made out of special, they were leaded with a special kind of metal that was worth a lot of money. And the roof was copper, it was all the stone, and as a junk man, I thought, well, I could salvage this thing if I can't do anything else with it. And I said, I'll give you $50,000 for it. The guy says, oh no, they got an offer for $125,000. I said, well, what you need to do is sell it to that guy. So I don't hear anything for a whole year. And I get a call again from that realtor, Jerry, would you still be interested in the castle? I said, I thought you had an offer for, well, that fell through. And I said, would you still give $50,000 for it a year later? So I said, I don't know, that'd bring on some talk. I said, I'd like to see it again. So I went up there, and the vines had grown up, and there were broken windows, and just a lot of repair. I said, well, frankly, it's worth $10,000 less than it was a year ago, because y'all was not taking care of it. And he says, I don't know. I said, well, here's the way I deal. When I make an offer on somebody, and that offer is good until the sundown. And after the sun sets, the deal's off. So I forgot about it. I went back to my office. And about 5 in the afternoon, I get a call from this guy. Can you still see the sun? And so that's how I bought the castle.
40,000?
For 40 grand or 50 grand?
And I bought a mobile home 3 or 4 years later in San Diego. I had to pay $35,000.
So when you moved up there, was the house in such disrepair that you could live in it, or?
Well, it wasn't, no, it just had, it was more cosmetic than anything.
Just,
Had a leaking roof.
Right.
That had been leaking for years. And that was expensive, which we would patch. But it had all these vines and it grown up, and of course it needed a lot of yard work. But for the most part, it was a well-built building. So,
yeah.
the bones were good, and we didn't do too much to it. I didn't have any money.
You lived there with your family, right?
Right. I lived there from 1960, I think it was 65 to 78, something like that.
And
You know, you wonder when it was built. When did Sealy build that?
19, we built the inn in 19,
13, right?
the hotel opened in 1913.
13.
it finished in 13.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he built the castle the next year.
So it must have been really hard for him to get up there, because that's pretty high up on the
No,
mountain.
they had a railroad, but by then it was Town Mountain, it's not Town Mountain Road, it's the other road.
Old
you
Toll?
think.
Old Toll?
Old Toll Road.
They had a
Town
railroad?
Mountain Road wasn't there at that time.
Okay, so they had a railroad going up there?
At one time, it was they called it a casino, it was a party place, that you go up there and have food and drink, I guess, outdoors or something.
Wow.
At the castle?
No,
No.
this is before the castle was built.
It was
Oh, okay.
yeah, the site.
He bought he bought the property, and what he did, there was a quarry up above there, and they quarried all this stone for all of these Grove Park. And the border joint, the specification was that no mortar joints would show. You know what the mortar joint is? So the rocks look like they just stacked on one another.
Yeah.
So it takes a very big rock. And they had all this small stone left over. And see, we got the same Italian
Mason?
builders, I forgot what their name was, but they also did a lot of work at the Development House. They stayed here for years doing work.
Gustavino,
No,
Well, I didn't-
Was it?
But anyhow,
he did the
Spanish.
dome at.
and they built that like a tapestry.
okay.
Huh, so that stone came from,
Right
The
up there.
quarry that
All
was-
of it came from up on the mountain, up
Yeah.
that place.
Now, did Grove not own most of Sunset Mountain? He didn't have like 1,200 acres or
I
so?
don't know how much he owned. He did own, they bought all this property down through here. up
Yeah.
on that. They bought a lot of that.
And because I thought that Grove owned basically everything from down here around Charlotte Street, all the way up the mountain, all the way across the mountain down into Chun's Cove.
Well, there was some land in Jones Cove, because I bought some of that at the castle at one time. I don't know what Grove owned, but the country club, which was then called the Hunt Club,
Swananoa Hunt Club, yeah.
was already there. And this Seeley is the one that had them build. She was playing at the Belmore Farm. They built a golf course, and she played on it. The story was that they wouldn't let her smoke on the golf course, so she came over here and built this one.
who's that? Wouldn't let us know.
Edie Vanderbilt.
Now, maybe it was the other one.
It was Edie Vanderbilt was over here at the Asheville Country Club.
Right.
It was built first. And she was smoking, the club manager called her down for smoking, so she hired Donald Ross to build a new golf course over at Biltmore. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
And the club manager was Bob Winnege's father, who we spoke to a couple months ago. He was the guy that told her to put out her cigarette.
Bob Winnege. Did you know Bob Winnege?
I did.
Yeah.
His father, Arthur Winnege, was the club manager that told Edith to put her
Really?
cigarette out. Yeah.
That's interesting, because Bob Winnegy was at least half Jewish, and I never knew that he had any connection with it. I went to school with him, I think.
How well did you know any of the Seeley family? Did you know Fred Seeley Jr. or Fred Seeley III?
Very casually. One time they all came and looked at the castle from all over, and I met him just once or twice, but I had no real knowledge of Fred.
Did you know Fred Seeley III? Fred Seeley Jr.'s son?
I didn't know the old Seeley at all.
Right.
I'm talking about, I knew the son.
Junior, yeah.
I met him once or twice, the one that sold this to Harry.
Okay, yeah. I met Fred Seeley III, who was Fred Jr.'s son. Fred III was here just a few years ago, and he now lives in Jacksonville, Florida. And he would be close to 90 years old now. He's very involved in the golf community down around Jacksonville. And he came here with his family, and I showed him around here, showed him the video. He's a very nice man, but you didn't know him. I asked him, I said, what was it like growing up here, in this area? He said, I was just running around with a bunch of rich kids. It's what he told me. I talked to somebody who went to Asheville school with Fred Seeley Jr., and he was telling me something about, I forget who it was, getting kicked out of Asheville school. But you didn't know Fred Seeley III.
No, I think one time somebody brought them all up to look at the castle, but that's all.
Right.
We found out recently that the luggage that's in the car museum down on the lower level was Evelyn Seeley's trunks.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Tell me a little bit, Jerry, about your partnership with Jack Dogboff.
Well, Jack was from New York City, and he came down here. His uncle was a gentleman by the name of Parmet. And he had come here to be the director of our new Jewish Community Center. And he came to visit Jack, and Jack and his wife,
Arlene.
Arlene, liked it down here. And Jack went to work first for, I think, Rudolph Gilbert, who was in the textile waste.
He also worked at the dealership.
No, that was later. Then he worked for,
Oh, yeah.
he worked for Irving Ness, who was in the similar kind of business. They all recycled all these textile, old rags as well. Well, they were into synthetics. They were the new kind of textile. Used to be the rag business.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like clothing and bed sheets and tablecloths and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But then all the synthetic fibers came out, and that became a huge business recycling. Asheville was probably the center of textile, of the synthetic textile recycling in the United States at one time.
And that's what the Schlossmans did as well, right?
Boston was the same thing. But he went to work for Irving Ness, who was there was Nettie Schlossman, who was a Ness, and she was married to Sam. Nettie's brother was Philip and Irving, and Jack worked for Irving for a while, I think down on Depot Street. Then he came to work for Harry, and one time, I don't know what he did, whether he was a car salesman or what he did over there, but Harry hired him. Harry had a parking lot across the street from the Civic Center. And when they had an event at the Civic Center, he charged people $25 or something to park. Harry went up there one day and had a box they were supposed to put the money in. Jack was out collecting the quarters, and Jack started to stick them in his pocket till he got through. He says, "Hey, boy, put those things in your mouth and you get back to that box and you won't forget to put them in there."
Put them in your mouth. Oh, gosh.
And then Jack came to me. He had some customer that liked him down in Hickory or somewhere. And they were buying some sort of textile waste. And he was no longer working for those people, but he had a place to sell it. He needed somebody, some company to, I guess, haul it and package it and send it off. And there was he had a pretty good profit worked out in it. And they asked me if we could go partners on it. And I said, well, we'll try it. And then he came to me and we did 2 or 3 of those deals, and he said, "I'd like to come to work for you." And I said, "Well, Jack, I'm just starting out here. I can't pay you a hell of a lot of money." And I said, we came to an agreement. And of course, he was a wonderful partner, and very smart, hardworking, and quick learner. And we had a great relationship and did very well.
And how did you get into the Conservco, the trash pickup business?
When I was working for my dad, I decided I wanted to get out on my own. I was going in, my dad had a retail, what I call wholesale metal from other dealers all over the South. I wanted to get in surplus and salvage because I'd seen what it seemed to me that this business was getting too competitive. And I told some friends of mine that were in the scrap business and everything that I was leaving and going in the scrap business. And they said, well, why don't you go into, do you have a dumpster system in Asheville? And I said, no, we don't have any of that. He said, well, we're converting a Dempster dumpster was a big box, and you pulled it up, or you put the trash, you pulled it up on the back of the truck, and you took the whole box to the landfill. And that was the first Dempster dumpster, which was much more efficient, even as inefficient as it sounds now, than trash cans. And the stuff went blowing everywhere. And so this guy was going to what they call a front loader now, which is the one you're familiar with. The truck picks it up like that. And he said, we've got a whole system. We'll put you in business up there. And they had a bunch of containers and a couple of beat up old trucks. And that's how it started out. And eventually we went to a front loader.
Where did you place your first dumpsters around town?
Oh, every business in town.
Every business in town?
Restaurants particularly.
Yeah,
People like Buck's Restaurant.
right.
He had all those barrels of trash. The city was picking them up for free, but it was such a mess.
Yeah. So did you know J.O. Buchanan
Very well.
pretty well?
Very well.
Yeah. What about Babe Malloy?
I knew him, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, J.O. Buchanan, his grandson is a good friend of mine, and his grandson told me that J.O. Buchanan was offered the first McDonald's franchise before Dick Frankel, and he said he didn't think that people would want to get out of their cars to have a hamburger because he had the drive-in, you know, where the car hop would come out,
Right.
and he declined on McDonald's the first time because he didn't think that people would want to get out of their cars. And Dick Frankel ended up being the McDonald's guy. Did you know Dick Frankel pretty well?
Yes, very well.
Yeah.
He was married to a Lipinski, I think, wasn't he?
Is what? It was what?
His wife was Lipinski, wasn't she?
I didn't know.
No, it wasn't. It was started with a W.
Weisenblatt, maybe?
But an interesting story about the first McDonald's. My mother took her grandchildren, Lynn and Pat, with their maid, Colleen, who was African American, to get something at McDonald's. And they went up, Colleen in a uniform went up to the counter to get it, and they wouldn't serve her
Colleen, because she was black.
because she was black.
Yeah.
And what's their demographic now? But she could not, and obviously my mother was so upset. Mother was in the car with the kids, but they would not give her the food.
And that was when McDonald's was walk up to the open air counter and the first...
I think they had a window or something.
Okay, yeah. And that would have been on the one on Tunnel Road?
The first one.
Yeah.
Franklin's.
Because I think the second one was over on Patton Avenue.
It's probably Tom.
Yeah.
I'll
Wow.
never forget that story.
Now, Colleen is still alive, right?
Yes, she is.
Yeah, because I talked to Lynn. Colleen was one of my mother's neighbors over at the Beverly. The
Okay.
Beverly Apartments. My mother lived over there for a long time.
Okay.
And I would see Colleen. At that time, she was still driving. She still got her Cadillac parked out front there.
And she still does.
And she's about 90, isn't she? Over
She's
90?
No, about 96.
Wow. Colleen.
Was that something that, kind of going on that topic, was that something, I mean, what was Asheville like at that time as far as racism? Like, didn't you say your
It
dad?
was totally Jim Crow.
Really?
Colored water fountains, colored waiting rooms, colored.
What?
Not black, colored.
How did your dad, didn't you say he employed a lot of black employees?
Daddy had the first and only used car salesman in the southeast, Sam Bird.
Wow.
And he worked down on Cox Avenue. We had the used car lot there. And he taught my sister how to drive, and he taught me how to drive. At one point, we were going around the corner on Edwin Place, you know, but real sharp. And I was driving, and Sam was sitting over there. He said, "Miss Babs, you're going to turn me white."
But Colleen has been part of your family for a long, long time, huh?
Since my sister's children were babies. Yeah.
Wow. Jerry, because you and I know each other from the Grove Park Inn golf course days, I've got just a couple of names I want to... Go ahead.
A story about Jim Crow.
Yeah.
So, my dad, I told you, was in the scrap metal business. But we didn't have an iron yard where they cut up cars and all that stuff. This stuff was small, for the most part, pieces of metal. And my dad, during the war, couldn't get any men. All the black men, everybody was off the war. He couldn't find them. We were using black men up to them to do this kind of work. And he couldn't find them because they were all gone. So he started hiring women, black women. Mostly, they had high school, they graduated from high school. And because they had an education, they were fast learners. And he started the first big operation in the South using black women to assort scrap metal. Now, when you had a real heavy lifting, we still had 2 or 3 black men around there. When you need some guy with some muscle, he would dump the barrel out and that kind of stuff. Eventually, and this is all over Jim Crow, he made had 2 or 3 black women that became department heads and supervised both black and white men and women. When I came back out of the service in 55, I think it was, I went to work in his new building. They built a new process building since I'd go to the military. And I went to work there, and we needed a forklift driver. And I taught the first black woman to be a forklift driver. But of course, all the white people around there, all the truck drivers were white, and a lot of the sales for all of them. When I said something, they just laughed. They said, "That's never going to happen." So I put her on the forklift, told her what to do. And the first thing she did was run it off the dock. We had to go get a record. It didn't hurt her, thank goodness, and put it back on the dock. I said, "Now you get on there and drive it again." She's the best forklift driver I ever saw.
Wow.
She was excellent. Women are much better heavy equipment operators than men are because they don't have that machismo thing that goes. If you watch a man with a forklift, he will run in there, grab that pallet, lift it up, jerk it out. The woman just goes in, gets the pallet.
More careful.
It's not just, that's why truck drivers like being on the road. They're sitting on that big truck. And,
Do you remember what her name was?
no, but eventually my dad used to have a weekly meeting with all these black and white supervisors, and it was really interesting. He was a pioneer of the rest of the industry, but still during Jim Crow, nobody would have hired those people. But he figured out that, what gave him the idea was that women were working in the rag business for people like Schlossman, and they were down there sorting rags, and he said, "Well, hell, if they can sort rags, they can sort metal."
Yeah.
And that's when he hired his first women.
Wow.
And it wasn't so much that he was, trying to be ecumenical, if that's the right word. But the point, it was a practical matter, and he wasn't going to let racism stand in the way of using people.
He needed good help.
Yes.
Wow. I got a couple names I want to run by you. Dr. Leon Feldman.
I knew him very well. He was my dad's best friend. He and my dad used to play golf. Leon he was bigger than life, I guess.
He did have a big personality. He was a huge University of Maryland fan.
Yeah, he was never wrong, let's put it that way. If you went to him with a broken arm and you died of a broken neck, you still died of a broken arm. but he and my dad were close friends. Leon was a leader in the community, and they played a lot of golf, and they walked to start with. My dad moved out on what's now Beaver Lake Golf Course out there. And they go out, and Leon was always in a hurry. So they played fast so he could go do his rounds at the hospital.
Yeah.
And they'd give gimmies about this big. But he was a character.
He had an office in the Flatiron Building, didn't
Yes.
he? Yeah.
And but he was a good leader. He was active, particularly in B'nai B'rith and nationally. He was well recognized.
Yeah. Did you know Dr. David Reiner?
No, did you know him?
No.
What about Bernie Goldstein?
Bernie Goldstein.
Blue Ridge Trucking.
Yes. Bernie was a fine fellow. He had a brother, Nehemiah. Bernie's son was Ronnie Goldstein. And they ran Blue Ridge. Bernie came out of the military. He was a truck driver in the military. That's how he got started in Germany, I guess, in Europe during the war.
Ernie Mills.
Ernie Mills, I knew well. Ernie Mills was in stockbrokers or something up in New York City, and he came down here and opened this parachute factory, and then he brought his brother down here, and it's still operating, by the way.
Mills
He
Manufacturing.
went out the other day and filmed that.
Cy and Dottie Flegel.
Knew Cy Flegel, he was in the retail
Furniture, right?
furniture business. Very nice man, very pleasant, and died very young.
And Dottie was one of Marilyn's good friends, right?
Dorothy
Right.
Joanne, her sister, yeah. The Rockamores.
He
they were
was married
Rockamores.
to
When Buddy had a heart attack on the golf
who
course.
did?
Buddy, my brother-in-law. So they brought him in, and as he was there, they brought Cy in, and Cy died of his heart attack.
Wow. So Buddy and Cy had a heart attack near the same time?
Yes.
And Cy didn't make it, and Buddy did. Huh?
Correct.
Wow. And Dottie Flegel was Joanne Rockamore's sister?
Correct.
So I didn't know that.
And they were Zagers. They
I
were
just remember-
Coleman Zagers' children.
When I was working at the Grove Park Golf Course, that your sister and Dottie and Joanne would always play golf together.
Yeah,
They seemed to be really close.
yeah, every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Until my sister started with the hospital.
Yeah. She was spending more time there than she was on the golf
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that we thought was kind of interesting, and in that your father was a Cadillac dealer, he would not want to seem very pretentious, and he would always be driving a Pontiac. Did he usually drive a Pontiac and not a Cadillac?
Well, his slogan was Cadillacs were made to sell.
Yeah.
So there were times when we would go to Florida or someplace like that, we'd drive Cadillacs because they were like these big houses on the road.
Yes.
But Mother might be driving a Cadillac and go to a luncheon at Grove Park Inn. And she'd come out afterwards and they'd bring up another car. And they said, well, Mr. Blomberg had to sell yours, so here's your car.
Cadillacs were for selling, huh?
Yes. So
Because I just
we
remember-
never knew what we were going to be driving.
I remember that Marilyn would always be driving a Pontiac. like a Pontiac station wagon or something like that
Yes.
a lot of times.
Yes,
And the only person I would ever see driving a Cadillac from your family would be Buddy,
but,
would be occasionally driving a Cadillac.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, we always drove the Pontiacs.
That's funny. Lou and Ruth Rifkin.
Very well, that's,
Paul.
Ruth was a Perlman.
Right.
The Perlman family, they're all were in the, Marty Perlman came here, refugees, and they opened the Railroad Salvage Company, which was furniture, and that's how the family got into the Perlman department.
Right.
Perlman's furniture store.
And I guess you know Lowell pretty well as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Skip.
And Skip.
And Skip. Yeah.
Skip's mother and father were Ann and Fred.
Fred and
Lou
Ann.
Rifkin was Skip's uncle. And Ann and Fred Parman were partners with Lou in the furniture business to start with. And they were the mother and father of Skip and Lowell.
I just remember Lou Rifkin being a very, very kind,
He was-
very sweet man who had a wonderful personality. He was very pleasant to be around. And,
He got out, went into secondary mortgage business.
and his son Paul, do you know Paul? He still lives here in town. I've seen Paul a couple of times, and Paul told me that he had several motorcycles that he either loaned to Buddy that used to be in the car museum. Do you remember when there were a number of motorcycles in there? Paul Rifkin said that those were his motorcycles.
Okay, I think I do remember them.
I don't remember them, but Paul told me
remember
that
them. Yeah.
he's been coming here to the car museum since he was a little boy, and he remembers some motorcycles being in here.
You
There was,
remember?
5 of them. Yeah, every time we'd come in, they had one of those, you remember the Whizzer motorcycle that was, you would take a bicycle, and they had a kit to put a gas tank and a little engine on it, and that was one of the bikes on display. And my grandfather was always like, he's like, oh, I wanted those. I remember when they sold that kit at Sears, but there was like an Excelsior, Harley Davidson, and a beautiful Indian Chief that was like a coral color, and I was fascinated because it had the little cast Indian head as a light on the front fender.
Uh-huh,
When I would come in, they were kind of where the LaSalle is now. There was
Okay.
like a little fence rail
oh, yeah.
in front of them, and then like an old
Yeah,
gas
I
pump.
do remember those actually.
Yeah.
So talking about that LaSalle, he said that you did recall Harry getting that car out of the Langren Hotel.
It was down in the basement somehow or other. I don't know.
They have to rent a crane or something to pick it up, to get it out of
I
there?
don't know how they got it.
It seemed like Jerry Ball told me when I first started working here, Jerry told me that they, because of the way the car was situated in the basement, that they had to Harry had to rent a crane to get that car out of there.
Huh,
I've forgotten how they got it. All I know is he got it out of there.
Yeah.
Might have been when we were tearing the building down. I don't know.
Were you involved with that, tearing down that hotel?
Yes,
Yeah. What year would that have been?
62 or 3.
Okay, early 60s. What about Mr. Lerner?
Harry Lerner?
Yeah.
Yes, knew him well. He was a refugee. I think he was an underground fighter in Russia, in Poland, I think he came from. He was a very Orthodox Jew. And he found his way here and opened up
Connie Fashions, yeah.
She was Miss North Carolina, Connie was his daughter.
His daughter, yeah. Yeah, she was Miss North Carolina in the 70s sometime, I think. Lipinski,
Which one?
I don't know. I guess there are a number of them, but that I know that family was involved with, was it Bon Marché?
Bombershea, he's
Yeah,
Solomon.
family lived on Kimberly Avenue in that big house you can see between,
Lewis and Clara.
right across from where y'all lived at one time.
No, it was further down.
further down, anyhow.
It
it's big
was towards
right there.
Graceland, but it's a big, big Tudor. It's for sale, it's been for sale.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Sit
Yeah,
behind.
across the street.
Bunch of trees,
Is
yeah.
that the Henry Gaines house? I think, did Henry Gaines design that house?
And their son Edward was a genius. And he was way ahead of his time in physics and all this stuff. And
Who was that?
he was sick for a year or so, and he read when he was about 6 or 7 years old. I think he read every book in the library.
Edward Lipinski?
And he was a
Oh,
great
yes.
chess player. But he and I were best friends as kids, and we would pal together and run around. And I lived around the corner, not too far. We lived down.
And he was friends,
West Omaha.
he was friends with my sister,
Who was
Edward Lipinski.
Edward?
Was friends with Marilyn.
Yeah, well, we were all
Yeah.
the same age. We all went to, Marilyn went to private school. We went to
St.
David, to Claxton together.
Right.
And Babs, when did your father buy the house on Kimberly Avenue?
Wait a minute. Jesus. 47, something like that.
So where did you live
Well, we
before?
started at 390 Kimberly Avenue, and then we moved up to 199
Okay,
Kimberly Avenue. And I
so
think-
you were living on Kimberly Avenue most of your childhood?
Yes.
Yeah,
No, all of my childhood was
Yeah.
on Kimberly.
When Edward and I were in Claxton, the school system wasn't too liberal about people who weren't Christians. And, however, Edward's daddy owned a piece of he was one of the partners in the Blomberg. And they had a Santa Claus. So every Christmas, they put on a Christmas play. And because they got Bomber Shade alone on the Santa Claus suite, and Edward the Jew played Santa Claus.
oh my goodness. I remember very plainly growing up in West Asheville, going to the Bon Marché that was out at Westgate Shopping Center, and my younger brother was a little, what you call husky, and he'd have to shop in the husky department at the Bon Marché. They didn't have as good a selection in the huskies. But I have a lot of vivid memories of going to Bon Marché when I was a kid, and also Winners. Ivy's and Winners were the two really nice.
Well, it was Ivy's, Winners, John Carroll, on going
Right.
to Haywood Street, Bombershea, what else was up there? Oh, Vogue Furriers. Then the Cadillac Company was right at the top of that, where
Mhm.
the Pit of Despair is now.
Yes,
That was the Cadillac Company.
yeah,
And across the street was Heritage Motor Inn,
Right.
which is now the library.
you spent a lot of time in downtown when you were young, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because
Every,
everything was downtown.
everything,
Yeah,
before them all.
yeah.
My uncle had the men's shop, Stephen Vance Men's Shop.
Oh, gosh, yes, yes.
Yeah, what about the man store?
That was Zager.
That was Coleman Zager.
Coleman Zager. You
Zager.
talked about his daughter,
Joanne and Dorothy.
Joanne and Doris.
Dorothy. Joanne and Dorothy was Coleman Zager's daughters.
Okay,
And Coleman Zager had a place on Patton Avenue. It was the man's store. And he would do things like, if he couldn't afford a kid just getting out of college, high school, he'd just say, okay, you can pay me back whenever.
yeah.
And usually that never happened, but that's the way he was. Very, very generous man.
Wow.
They sold Biltmore Industries fabric at the man store, I think, too.
They did?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, did not know that.
He did well with Biltmore.
They sold the woven fabric, Biltmore Industries fabric at the man store.
He was really a nice man.
Yes, he was.
How about Hyman Dave?
Hyman Dave was iconic in this community. Joe Dave was the one who got all the publicity, his brother, because Joe Dave came here, he went to State University. My granddaddy on Depot Street had a small steel fabricating operation down there, and Joe Dave came as his draftsman. And my grandfather told him to go open Dave Steel, which was very successful. And Hyman Dave came to work with Joe. And when they retired, Hyman did all sorts of things. He managed the Asheville City Club. He managed what was it called? What was the other private club? Wasn't it on the golf course?
Wolfson?
No.
Oh, not the Manor.
No, what's the club that, Asheville Country Club, he managed that for a while, and then he worked with his grandson to build a huge textile waste business.
Huh. Now, Jerry, Dave, is not Hyman's son, is he? He's his nephew?
His son of Joseph Dave,
Joe Davis.
who was the first partner in Dave's team.
Okay, because I was not sure. I knew Jerry and his son Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff is about my age, and I still see him occasionally. What about Bill and Leon Rockamore?
They knew them well. They were in the
Restaurant supply.
Restaurant supply.
Yeah.
They were natives here, grew up here. His mother lived in the same apartment we lived on Hillside Street in the early 30s. His mother lived there.
Fan.
Rockmore.
I wanted to ask one question about, speaking of Babs, the house that's built behind here that Lynn and Carl live in, was it Buddy and Marilyn that built that house?
That house was built for, when Daddy bought this property.
Uh-huh.
He gave, of course, the fence wasn't there, he gave them that land for their house. They built it in the early 60s, and they lived there. Yeah, that was their house.
And then that was designed, it's a Burt King designed
It's a Burt-
house? Do you
Burt
guys
King designed
remember,
it.
do y'all remember anything about Burt King?
Oh, yeah. He was a good-looking man. Remember Burt King? Burt King, the architect.
Yeah.
He and Judy, his wife, were friends with my sister and brother-in-law, so I used to see them all the time when I was here. Yeah.
To get back just a minute about Seeley's Castle, you had a plan to turn Seeley's Castle into a tourist attraction similar to the Biltmore House?
What I had, my first thought was after I had it, that it should be shared. I mean, there's magnificent architecture out there at the Biltmore Estate, but certainly the architecture of Seeley's Castle is iconic.
Yes.
It should have been shown. And somebody came to me, they had this traveling display of, I don't know, art and artifacts and stuff, and they'd bring it in and set it all up, and then after 6 months or 3 months, they'd bring in a whole new set of stuff, and they kept moving all this stuff around, and I thought, well, that might be a good use for that. And then, as soon as I mentioned that, I became public enemy #1 on South Mountain Road. Then there was a sky ride. You know what a sky ride is? When these things you get over, it's got like a chair ride.
Chairlift?
Chairlift.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Down in Tennessee, they had it, I think, when they had the World's Fair there or something. And we had a chance to buy it, and we were thinking about bringing the people up from Southern Cove that way, so that wouldn't bother the people on Town Mountain, but we could have bought it for nothing. It was taking it down, putting it up, and getting the land, and that went through. Then, I was very close to making a deal. I wanted somebody to worry, I was mostly worried about the upkeeping, so I could spend some money. I didn't have any money to, take care of all the deterioration and landscape it better and get all that stuff done. And so I was very close to making a deal with the manager at the Grove Park Inn. I can't think of his name.
That's not Salmons.
Huh?
Not Mr. Salmons.
No, this is much later.
Oh, later?
This guy was anyhow, well, this is when, I don't know, I guess Sam was on it, but anyhow, the manager, he liked it very much. And, he was the one that had the city club. What was his name, that manager? I can see him. Anyhow, we were gonna make a deal that he could bring, if the Grove Park Inn would spend some money to help us upfit it and keep it up and do all that kind of stuff, we would allow Grove Park Inn guests to come up and take a tour of the castle. But he got moved away by the time that started to come together.
Huh.
So that deal never came to fruition.
No,
How well did you know the Cecil brothers, George and Bill?
not very well at all.
Didn't?
I wasn't people that kind of
And
people
my
that
sis-
wanted to.
My sister and George were on the St. Joseph Board Foundation together,
Right,
so she knew him pretty well,
yeah.
but that's it. So, anything else?
What are we thinking?
I think there's a lot of really great information.
Yeah, I can't thank you two enough
Yeah, thank
for
you
sitting
guys.
down with us. We're really trying to get a little better understanding of, everything that's gone on here over the years. We're trying to, pass along good information to Anna and June and the next couple of generations of people that will come in here and wonder what this place was, why it was here, the history of it. So to have you two here and to talk in this casual manner is really we're very thankful for your generosity with your time.